Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. What was life like in the 1990s? Well, I talk about it a little bit in this book, Afterglow Generation Y. Mostly it's actually about after the 1990s, how people react to the change in technology that happened after the year 2000. This is free for my patrons, by the way, this month on Patreon. And actually, before I go any further, I do want to plug the Christmas book for this year, Christmas 2024. Won't be available after January, so you can spend your Amazon bucks after Christmas on it if you want. It has 10 of the Eternal Dream books, so almost all of them, not the Moonsong books, but everything else. So great gift for people if you're trying to get them into My Fantasy, or for anybody that's new and wants to get all the books in one place, including The Bright Children, which has never been printed before, so you get something new with it. Anyway, what was life like in the 1990s? Well, there's two really big differences. A lot of things are actually the same, right? We had videos in the 90s. They were just, you had to go to the video store to get them, right? You got DVDs or VHSs and plugged them in your TV and you could watch movies. So yeah, you could watch movies at home. You just weren't streaming them off Netflix, right? We had music. It was on the radio, or we bought CDs, or we burned CDs for friends, or we recorded on tapes a little bit before that, and we would trade tapes. So we had plenty of music. It just wasn't as convenient. You couldn't whip out a device out of your pocket and listen to any song from any time ever, right? It was harder to get the music. There was a lot more friction to getting music and getting movies, but we still had that. We could still record videos. People had camcorders. We took photos. We had cameras, and we even had instant photos. We had Polaroid cameras. So we had virtually all of the stuff that we had now. We even had computers, but our relationship to that technology was significantly different. And the computer is a big one because we didn't have computers in our pockets. We didn't, most of the time through the 1990s, we didn't have cell phones. I only knew people who had cell phones really towards the very end of the 1990s. My mom had one earlier in the 90s, but it was like the family cell phone, and it was for emergencies, and it cost like $2 a minute to use it, and it was a giant brick. And my dad had cell phones as part of his company connections for years, so it wasn't that new to us. Even in the 80s, we had cell phones, we had VHSs. So the 90s and the 80s weren't that different. Just there was more friction towards getting those things. The main thing that was different was the speed of life and the connectedness of everything that really disrupts our ability to kind of be with ourselves and to take it easy. The 90s felt slow. Typical day in the 90s is you would wake up, you didn't check your phone. Chances are you didn't get any text messages because those weren't a thing. You didn't have any phone messages, probably, because people weren't calling you in the middle of the night, and you had an answering machine with a tape, and your phone would have rung, so you didn't have anything to check. Even if you had something like AOL Instant Messenger or ICQ, you weren't going to turn on your computer, wait for it to boot up, load up AOL, and see if anybody sent you a message overnight. And dial in with your modem, because you had to dial in the internet to a physical modem. You didn't do that. So you weren't checking any messages. You just woke up and got ready for school, if you were in school, or woke up and got ready for work. That's what you did. Maybe you might turn on the TV while you did something, like in the kitchen. People had little TVs in their kitchen. They'd turn it on if they were kind of, watch the news while they did breakfast or something. But yeah, you just woke up, you brushed your teeth, you went to school. Your friends, you saw them at school. You didn't know what happened to them after they left school. You didn't know what happened to them after you stopped talking to them. And maybe they showed up at school. Maybe they didn't. You might decide to go to the mall after school. We're all going to meet at the mall at 4:30. If Mike didn't show up at 4:30, you just had to live with the mystery of whatever Mike was doing. We didn't know where Mike was. Maybe we see him at school on Monday. Maybe we don't. You just live with the mystery of not knowing what happened to people because people didn't have cell phones. You couldn't stop like, let's call Mike's cell phone. It wasn't until really late in the 90s. Like I had a couple friends who had cell phones in like 1999, and I was in a public school, but there was still a lot of wealthy kids. And so they started to get cell phones towards the very end of the 1990s, but I didn't have one until the 2000s. I had a car and that was cool. So, but I didn't have a cell phone to tell anybody where I was going. I had to tell my parents where I was going ahead of time, and we all just kind of had to trust that I would be back at the right time. And, I remember one day where I didn't show up, and it was a big deal because like I came home an hour late. I'd been at a friend's house playing Ocarina of Time, of all things, because it was the day that game came out, and we were very excited for it, and I got in big trouble. So that's what life was like, right? You just had to trust that people did the things that they were going to do because we didn't have that connection. The computer, which had the internet, was in a corner, and you had to dial up to the internet with a modem. So the internet was a thing, but you were really separated from it. There was a lot more friction, like with everything else. We had the internet, more friction. The internet also just wasn't as good, right? It was a lot harder to find information. So that's the second big thing that really changed with the 2000s going into 2010, when by the time we have smartphones and social media and a really robust internet environment with lots of information overload, really, that's when we get kind of the new society, the new paradigm of where we're at. Before that, information was just really sparse. You got information thrown at you and you just accepted it because there was no alternative opinion. You couldn't go online and see what someone else thought. You couldn't go online and check what someone thought about it on YouTube. You didn't know that the food pyramid was a bunch of bullshit because there was no one to tell you anything different. The government school told you that the food pyramid was the way that you needed to eat. And so that was the way you needed to eat. Unless you were reading bodybuilding magazines in the 90s, you wouldn't know what like any kind of other nutrition was. You wouldn't know what a 40-40-20 split was. You wouldn't know how to measure your food or know what a gram of protein was. You didn't know any of this crap, okay? The stuff that you could get in a 5-minute YouTube video was just gone. It was absent. It didn't exist. No one had this information in the 90s. All the gym teachers, they didn't know what it was. They had no idea about nutrition. No one knew about any of this stuff, right? We were told to eat 7 to 11 servings that's 11 slices of bread per day. You wonder where the obesity epidemic came from? It's because we were taught how to eat in the worst part. We were taught how to eat according to the USDA, which is like, let's make sure everybody's eating things that we produce in the agriculture industry. So they're eating some of everything. You're buying you're buying some of everything at the grocery store. That's the main thing. We just didn't have any alternative information because the computer was over there in the corner. Yes, that's good in a lot of ways. It was bad in other ways. So the good was we were a lot more in the moment. Things were a lot slower. You didn't felt rushed to do anything. When you got out of school, you walked home. I walked home. I'd walk a couple friends home, and then I would go home by myself. Get home. Nobody's at home. No parents are at home. It's just an empty, quiet house. The dog's at home. You play with the dog. Throw your bag down. Yeah, maybe you need to do the dishes. You don't do the dishes. You wait. Mom will come home and tell you to do the dishes. Now is the time for us to play a PlayStation game. Now is the time for us to play Doom on the computer. Now is the time for us to boot up our computer and do something fun. Play Warcraft. Not World of Warcraft. Warcraft. Orcs and Humans. Right? That's what you did in the 90s. There was just no pressing need to do anything. You didn't feel like we were missing out on anything by not doing something. And you didn't feel like you were like losing time by not accomplishing great things. Like if you felt like working out, you would. Now, if you didn't work out, you didn't. Whatever. You work out some other day. You know, you could practice guitar some other day. Now, I practice like every day because I didn't really have anything else to do because life was very boring and there was a lot of waiting around in the 90s. That's the other thing. It's like you didn't get bored and whip out your phone and check Twitter or something. You lived with the boredom. You lived with the boredom. You would spend a lot of time in line waiting to get your square piece of pizza, you know, waiting to go into class, waiting to leave class. Walking between, like there was just a lot of empty time. But it made you feel like you just didn't have anything pressing to do. Even your homework, you're like, I'll do my homework tomorrow, right before class. Who cares? No pressing need to do anything. Now, you know, we have a little band. We don't really have to rehearse. We'll do that some other day. You know, there's no pressing need to do it because, and a lot of it was like the goals were so lofty and so far away, there was almost no reason to try to achieve them. Like, how did you become successful in a rock band? Well, you had to get together, you had to write some songs, you had to make a demo, you had to get out and gig. Maybe an A&R guy would see you at the gig, and then maybe you eventually get a contract with the recording. That's the only way that you made it in the record business. So that took so long, it was so much effort. You just didn't feel compelled to like do it. It's the same thing with like being really fit, is it just felt like it was a long process. So you just didn't feel motivated to do it. Everybody was they took it easy in the 90s. Everybody was taking it easy. There was a lot less anxiety. I talked about this in my article, YouTube the mall before 2006. If you go type that into YouTube, mall before 2006, you're going to get a bunch of videos that are really interesting because there's no smartphones and it's really early video, so it's really bad video quality. But you get the sense that no one really cared that you were recording anything. People weren't anxious all the time because of phones, where people have an HD video camera in their pocket and could take a picture of you or record you doing something, saying something bad. There's just an anxiety, a low-level anxiety that comes with our use of phones today. I'm anxious I'm going to check my phone. I'm anxious somebody could be recording me. I'm anxious because everything is being, we're living in the pupil of 1,000 eyes. That's how it is. That didn't exist in the 90s. It was really casual. We used to do stupid stuff at the mall. Let me slide down the banister. I'll throw soap in the fountain at the movie theater. We would do stupid and sometimes criminal things with no thought for the future, because the idea was like, even if you got caught, how on earth could it affect you? Nobody would know. Nobody would care. Tomorrow was a new day and no one would know about the stupid thing you did. No one was watching you all the time. Now it's like, hey, I'm going to slide down the banister at the mall. It's like someone's going to record that. It's going to be on the internet. When you fall off the banister looking like an idiot, it's going to be like, here's an idiot compilation. Here's David Stewart from Fresno, California, falling off the banister. Let's all laugh at him. And then everyone, hey, I saw you on the internet last night at school. That didn't exist. That wasn't a thing back then. So it just way less anxious about everything. And the friction for getting information, that's the other big one. So the first one is it's slower, less connected, less anxious. The other one was a lot of friction for getting information, friction for getting other things too. The last one I'll really say about the 90s was, we are so overwhelmed with temptations with the ease of the internet that we're just barely there. There was just a trickle. Like if you're thinking of a flood of tempting things to look at, it was just like this trickle. Things were hard to find on the internet. Websites sucked. People had to do a lot of cross links in order for you to find anything on the internet. Kids would plagiarize stuff on the internet. Teachers had no idea. They didn't care, right? Just people didn't know how to use the internet, and the internet wasn't that good yet. And when I talk about temptations, a big one is actually pornography, right? In order to get adult material in the 1990s, most of the time you had to get it from a store. If you had the internet, it would take so long to download the pictures, if you could find them, because a lot of them wanted adult verification. They wanted you to pay $1. Everything asked for like $1 a month at least from your credit card. So you had to have a credit card to try to get this information. And I knew people that used to use like phished credit cards in order to verify their fake age to slowly download naked pictures. You had to get like a magazine from a store. Video porn was practically unheard of. It was so rare to find something, and now it's just free and limitless and everywhere, in your face, tempting you from all different directions. It wasn't like that. That friction made just a big difference, I think, on a lot of people's lives if you were coming of age in the 1990s compared to later, and where you had infinite access to this kind of stuff. It was just a very different world, right? So while it was difficult to find information, there was a lot of friction for just getting anything else. This kind of goes with movies too, right? We had movies. You had to go to the movie store to get them. So the idea that you would quit watching a bad movie 15 minutes into it and do something else, you didn't do that in the 90s. You rented a movie. You paid $2.99 for that movie. You're going to watch the movie. You put in the tape and you watch that whole bad movie, and you would do it. And it's like, well, nowadays I would never do that. But my time is worth so much more. But my time was completely worthless in the 90s. There was nothing else important to do. Yes, we would watch 3 bad movies on Friday night and goof off because there was nothing else important to do. There just was nothing else important to do in life. You never felt like you were just kind of floating around in life. You didn't feel like you had to do anything tomorrow, so you just didn't. And that's the way it worked. So, yeah, those are the big ones. Slower, no need to feel like things were doing tomorrow. No need to worry about tomorrow, I guess. And then way less information. In a bad way in most of the cases. People just accepted what the news said. If you want to know why baby boomers are so bad about this stuff, is they spent their entire life before the internet. They were 50 when the internet became really ubiquitous. And by that time, they had been completely habituated into passively receiving information and accepting it. And in the 90s, we did. And in the 2000s, there was this mass disillusionment where we're like, oh my gosh, everything I learned in school was wrong. Or they taught us poorly, or they didn't tell us the whole thing. You just accepted that you were getting taught the correct things back then, even if you weren't. It was weird. It was weird. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below, down in the comment section. Like I said, patrons at Patreon, you get the Afterglow Generation Y book for free. And don't forget to buy the giant, as big as my giant head. My head's big. Okay, this book is not small. My head is big. It's like 600 pages, 10 books. Eternal Dream Christmas. Available only this Christmas season. And leave me your thoughts down below. What did you think about the 90s? Or maybe you're of the younger generations, because I love to get their input on this, about like how life is more anxious, or how they feel anxious or something. Anytime I sit down and talk to a young person, I start to gather these things that I don't get, because my formative experience was really before the internet. How different and wild it is. How wildly different it is now compared to how it used to be. So leave me your thoughts down below, and I'd love to read them, and I will see you all next time.